Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Inevitability Curve. In this series, we talk to interesting folks about interesting topics that have evolved over time. And with me today is an old friend, Roy Pereira, who is currently the CEO of Unified API. How are you doing, Roy?
Hey, I'm doing well, Chris.
As you should be, as you should be. So as we were talking about in the green room a minute ago, you and I have had some shared experiences. We worked together quarter century ago in the security space at Cisco. Since then, you spent a lot of time looking at AI, and in the conversation leading up to this, I love this SaaSpocalypse, right? You might be coming to a crux in this software as a service, for those of you who don't know what SaaS is, era. So I'd like to take this conversation. Let's start at the start. Let's go back as far as either of us think we should. How did we get to where we are today? So I will throw that to you. How did we get to where we are today?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 25 years ago. I try not to think that I'm that old, but 25 years ago,
bonus rounds.
This was 1999. The .com was going crazy. People were getting massive valuations, going public, and so forth. I think you and I were both working at Cisco Systems, which was the darling of the time. But it wasn't about Cisco, actually. It was really, Cisco was creating the conditions that we all needed for SaaS to come out. Salesforce was the company that really pushed it. Back in 1999, 2000, they came out and said, hey, just don't install software, just go to the cloud, just use ours. And it was a really interesting turning point because it changed the way that everyone today uses the internet, uses applications, and is productive, basically. We did not realize what that would allow us to do. We were thinking about, oh my God, I don't have to ever upgrade software on someone's computer. That was like the benefit, right? Obviously, that ushered in subscription pricing, which that wasn't a thing before. But it also ushered in connectivity between applications. All of a sudden now you were able to connect to other applications on the internet because it was public. So this interconnectedness happened. And it massively grew the number of applications that we had, right? If you think back to 1999, you could count the number of applications in each category on a hand, right? That's not the case today. You look at, say, recruiting software, recruiting tech. I've lost count. It's like in the hundreds, multiple hundreds. And a lot of them do the same thing, but a lot of that is because of SaaS.
Right. In thinking about this topic, right? So I got involved in this in the early firewall market in about 92, more or less, right? And Bell Canada was one of the first VARs, a value-added reseller for the modern parlance. And in selling some of firewall and teaching him how to use it and getting it set up, was really the first conversations I had about the managed firewalls as a service, right? And by the late 90s, when you and I got together, it's starting to happen. Now we've gotten to this phase where, as you say, it's all out there. And just, all along the value to me, I find myself in the security context, having these conversations with other security people. It's like, most companies shouldn't have a security staff. They make shirts, and IT writ large. Like, how many people, how many specialists do you need to have on board to make denim jackets? At some point, this needs to be outsourced. So we get the cloud, we get SaaS, and I think that's led to issues that we sort of have to work through in the near term, right?
For sure. I think it's interesting that you bring up security. Both you and I obviously were in security. I was in security. You, I think, I still are. But I don't think people really think about security with new scenarios. Like when SaaS came out, we didn't really think about security in the cloud. We started to think about it, obviously, once we got into it. I think it's very similar to what we're in today, which I know we'll talk about, which is AI. Right, so you see a ton of companies moving into AI with little regard to security, whether it's privacy or leaking data, just so much issues that I don't think most companies have really thought about. So security typically is still an afterthought.
Well, and Don Alsop, my boss at SeaChange, here in Ontario in the early '90s. I talked him into going ahead with my crazy idea for a firewall, and then we ran into the problem that there weren't enough IP addresses, right? And if you know this one, there's the network address translation NAT at 192.168 or 10. Whatever you see on your computer. Everybody knows it now. Didn't exist at the time, and I realized this. Somebody put it in my head. And I'm like, oh my god, the internet's not going to work. And John, this, and he didn't blink an eye. Of course, he was old and wise, like our age now, right? And he just sat there and he said, look, anytime there's enough of a demand, a technical solution is found. And within 15 minutes, Andrew Flint and Omaya Elgundi and I invented network address translation, as did two other groups totally independently at the same time. And now we all have NAT, and we're still using IPv4, and we still haven't run out of addresses. And so many issues since then in the security and non-security space see the same sort of thing. It's like, well, let's pick a point in time. Cisco Secure Network, right? The turn of the century, 2000. You and I and the rest of the Cisco team built up an architect, put together this what is reasonably called a marketecture, right? We weren't necessarily selling all that, but we said this is what it should look like, and it still should. But if you really want to do that with the scales we have these days, how are you going to have people do this by hand faster? And you can't. Therefore, unless we're wrong about this, something else is going to take its place. So SaaS and cloud, that was obviously right. Not everybody can afford to have their own teams and economies and scale. Securing that, and to the point I know you'll be bringing up, actually using it, like being effective with this stuff, requires us to change our models. We're not doing things by hand. We're using, I'll say it, artificial intelligence by the definition we tend to use these days. And we're going to be automating and scaling stuff up because, the old ways just don't continue to work. But the architectures were right.
Yeah. So the way that I look at it is the last 20, 25 years have been a boom time for software, for all types of software, not just enterprise, but consumer as well, because of the cloud, right? The infrastructure, the plumbing that companies like Cisco set up in the late 90s. Maybe we didn't see the benefit in 2000, 2001, certainly during the dot-com crash. There's just so much cat litter that you can buy off of pets.com, right, to really see the benefit of all that fiber that we were laying down. But over the last 20, 25 years, I think we've just sort of gotten used to that. This is the norm, and it's been really a boom time. It's been like a gold rush, because when you look at VCs, venture capitalists, and what they fund, they know that they can consistently get returns on the average by investing into a SaaS company, a new software for SaaS that does whatever XYZ, just because the market itself was growing at a phenomenal rate year after year after year for 25 years. And there was a lot of truth to what Mark at Salesforce said early about how software is eating the world. What he meant was that software is eating the old world, the on-prem world, where again you were installing software on-prem in your closet kind of thing. But the problem is, right now at least, we've hit a wall. There is no on-prem, and there hasn't been in a couple of years. And so that growth in SaaS, I think, has started to slow down. I think we've seen people concerned with Salesforce's ability to grow and their stock price. But I think the bigger issue, and I think you started to allude to that, is now we have AI, right? And we've had AI for forever, actually. We now have useful AI, whatever adjective you want to use. This stuff, even though it doesn't think for itself, it's not a human, whatever, it's actually pretty damn useful, and it can actually do stuff now, as opposed before it was like a parlor trick that was kind of cute. And that's where I think we're about to see a massive change. We're seeing it starting, but it's going to it's going to be a massive change in the next 5 to 10 years.
I frankly agree. I think this is, in the last episode, Tim Roxy, good friend, was on, and he's been involved with the power grid, for 40, 50 years, a nuclear engineer, and we were talking about artificial intelligence, and I love, common memes are great. We understand AI, we can talk about it and so forth, but to be clear, it's not artificial, nor is it intelligent, nor is it really new, but the differences are important. We had sort of deterministic AI in the past, and that's been very useful in certain ways. And now we have this emergent AI that's allowing us to do things we didn't think we could do before, right? If I had 1,000 interns, I could do X, Y, Z. But since I'm not going to, I won't consider doing it. And I think that plays into your point, right? To scale this SaaSpocalypse doesn't mean that everything's going to stop working. It means we're driving past a point, and the old way of doing things isn't going to work very much longer. And as luck would have it, we do have the tools, I think, to do the things we need to do.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really other interesting point. As technologists, we always talk about technology, software, hardware, but it's the human side that's actually interesting, because I'm concerned, and I was concerned 10 years ago too. So my last company started off as an AI assistant 10 years ago. Nobody wanted to pay us anything, and which is kind of ironic, right? Because then now every other company is an AI assistant company, and there's a ton of funding available for that. But what we learned was that AI has the ability, when done properly, when it's useful, to not just affect software and technology, but really affect humans and the way that we could live, really. And I was concerned 10 years ago that didn't actually take shape. Might take shape this time, because again, the AI that we have today, the technologies, is much, much better on magnitudes, right? So what you're getting at is, do I have a job anymore? Or if I'm an intern, can I get an intern job? It's kind of hard. If I'm a junior lawyer, can I get a job in a law firm? Maybe today, if you're really good, in 2 years, maybe not, right? And so, like, if you're a junior and you're just stepping into the workforce, can you get a junior level job? Because the AI basically is just as good. And you know what? Doesn't take breaks, doesn't talk back, doesn't want all sorts of stuff. So I am a little concerned about that, because that has a waterfall that's quite negative in terms of the way that we structure our civilizations. In fact, like, it's that fatalistic, but you can see why some of the tech leaders in Silicon Valley are pushing for guaranteed basic income, right? Because they see the pitchforks and the riots happening if the vast majority of people don't have jobs because they're being taken away by useful AI.
And which is an interesting twist on it. I've said it on this in the show before, but I belong to all three major American parties. I get it, right? And UBI, universal basic income, first crossed my bow maybe 10 years ago, and it sounds a little silly the more you think about it. I like thinking about that as a national dividend. Like, assume you're Canadian, I'm a Yank, so take a country, everybody gets one share. If the country's profitable, you'll get more in your UBI or less, right? I like the capitalist drivers, but I also have 320-something kids, right? And what happens over the long term, we can talk about in a minute, might be deterministic. I think there are certain things about the future, getting past the details of the immediate future, the next couple of years, and these sort of cases will work out fine. However, that may not help you a whole lot.
Yeah, during the Industrial Revolution, it did work out, right? So this could be one of those instances where, as humans, we adapt, we survive, and we're going to be forced to. And so we'll come up with different things. Maybe it's going to be like a Star Trek universe where, nobody gets paid and everything is free, but maybe not, probably not. But anyways, we don't have to get into that, but because it's, who knows? But I think it is an interesting after effect of this technology.
Well, I think, I'd love to get into the AI assistant thing with you longer. We probably won't do it here, but right, it's funny, talking to you this morning. I have been that's been stuck in my head. And when I say AI assistant, I mean that everybody gets one. Everybody, right? What does that even mean? Not when it's expensive, but when it's basically free. What would it mean if everyone you knew had a personal assistant that was paying attention to them? Think next level past current AI, give it a generation or so. How much more time does that free up? Now, if we couple that with the same AI taking all their jobs, we have other problems. But the opportunity as individuals and as societies to leverage more of the population, and call it workforce or not, however we're measuring their productivity, I see, mid to long term future opportunities for societies to do phenomenally well, right?
I agree. I think you said something that I think we need to be open to, which is like define work, right? If you go back 100 years, work was defined differently, right, than what we're working today. Like I'm looking at you on a screen, right? Is this work? I'm working at home right now on Friday. Does that work? 5 years ago, probably that wouldn't be considered work even. And so I do think that we're in, we're about to go through some bumpy rides where we're contemplating what work does. What do I do? How do I benefit society, maybe, in the type of work. So I think that's interesting, but do we actually execute the work? I think is also a really good question, because more and more in my team, in my company, we don't execute. The AI executes. The AIs, there's multiple, right? And so we come up with stuff, and in fact, we actually get AIs to help us come up with some of that stuff. But the execution a lot of times is automated and it's done by an AI. And that's where I really do see us moving towards. And that means that I need less people. All right. Again, back to my issue about, we can probably be $100 million revenue company with 10 people. And we're not going to be an anomaly. I think that's going to be the norm. So what does everyone else do? That was my initial question. And but again, not to be too fatalistic, because I'd rather be on the more positive side of things.
Well, I'm born in 1965, so I'm basically the oldest of the Gen Xers, but I was, the youngest of all my family in all directions, skipped years of school. So I was the youngest of my peer group. And I think a lot of the current cultural gestalt, whatever you want to call it, has a lot of pessimism built into it. But after 59 years, we have seemed to have survived all the apocalypses, that have come towards me. The first memory I have of a talking head, people like us, on a screen somewhere, is 1969. I'm 4 years old. A guy named Paul Ehrlich had published The Population Bomb, was on every boomer's bookshelf. And he's on TV saying it's physically impossible for the world to feed more than 3.54 billion people. And it's currently 3.52 billion people. So 100 million Americans will starve to death in the 70s. And you got to remember, I'm 4 years old, right? And I'm just thinking, crap, that's going to suck. And we make, to be clear, 30% more food with 88 billion people than we did with 3, right? So I think we find solutions to this.
I agree. I think the Gen Xers will definitely find a solution.
I have a lot of faith in the generations coming behind us. I look at, let's talk about the future, for a minute, because I look at, we, the Gen Xers and the Boomers and so forth, the me generation of the 60s and 70s have, as we always do, as humans do, gotten older, and we're like kids these days, much like was said about us in our teens and 20s. I think kids these days will work it out. Yeah. I think they will develop the tools and come up with the methodologies to keep making the world a place worth being. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I think we're just entering it now in terms of this massive upheaval. If we go back to software and SaaS, like I said, we've had pretty easy game plan for the last 20, 25 years. And I think that's changing right now. It changed starting last year when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, and everyone realized that it was actually useful. And now, we're into 4. They just launched, what was it? 01. yesterday. Anyway, so it's just going to keep getting better and better and better, and it's growing exponentially in terms of benefits. So we definitely do see in our own customers. So we provide unified APIs to B2B SaaS companies, right? Infrastructure, so that they can talk to other SaaS companies and get customer data. And so SaaS apps come to us for this infrastructure, and we're seeing these trends, and we're at just the forefront. And it's just amazing because 12 months ago, actually 15 months ago or so, we weren't seeing this AI shift, and now we are. And in fact, it's almost 100% coming in. It's all AI, and it's no longer traditional SaaS applications that would fit neatly into these categories that we've always known for 20 plus years. So yes, there's a new category, and it's not well defined. It's just like AI first, whatever that means. Traditional categories, SaaS categories, are adding AI to compete. And then the fact that AI now can build, that's really interesting, because I theorize that we are going to get inundated with everyone and their grandmother building a SaaS app, and a B2C app. And we have, I think, 35,000 SaaS apps globally, according to our count. I think that's going to go to like 35 million, maybe, right? Because it's just so damn simple. Like anybody, your 6-year-old can go on to Claude or maybe the new ChatGPT 4 and ask it to build an app. That's going to be interesting because we already have too much. As like an end user, we have too many options, and so it creates no winners. How about that? Right. And so there's too many options. And so every option gets, let's say, 10 customers, and they can't grow anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. But I think that's going to change. I think this is short-lived. I think in the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see a massive crash of the number of SaaS apps as AI and AI agents take over. And they just kill off all of these single feature SaaS apps. And that's going to be a pretty massive drop. And we're starting to see some of that now. We're starting to see some of these larger enterprises who have maybe more resources in-house around AI, starting to do an audit of all of the software that they pay for on a monthly basis, and ask themselves why. Why are we paying X dollars for these apps? We can just build them, right? So either we build them with the use of AI, or we get AI agents to do that for us. And I think that's going to be the norm. And that's going to be the next thing that is going to reshape all of software, I believe.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the scale issues of this, and we'll take this as to end on, because I think there is there's a similar pattern in this, right? If we go forward and keep increasing X, at what point is X larger than the mass of the planet? Completely unmanageable. And if it's not going to decrease, we need to do something else, right? You can't do it by hand. And the examples you put out there, we've gone from this, look, I'm going to buy software and install it, to I'm going to buy, I will rent software that's on the cloud somewhere, but I'll rent it monolithically. Somebody else has built this big thing, I'll sign into that, or I got my API. And to be clear out there, this is not a sponsored piece, so not pushing your products, but as I understand it, you're simplifying that, because there's unified API. Sounds to me like, instead of having 7,000 ways to deal with all these different things, how about one, right? And in a similarly, if AI can build the apps for us, then we're not going to be choosing them all by hand. We're going to automate all that.
Yeah, and we can end on this one. So we started talking about Salesforce and how they ushered in SaaS, right, 25 years ago. We're now seeing larger companies remove Salesforce, remove Workday, stop paying these kind of large fees, and they're building these inside. Now, they may not need all the functionality, but I think what's happening, and it will definitely be happening more and more, is the fact that AI is taking over the tasks that humans used to do in these large platforms, sources of truth like Salesforce, Workday, and so forth. Humans are no longer doing those roles, those little tasks. AI is doing it. And so the value of those large platforms is diminishing. And it's diminishing so much that they basically become a database, and a very expensive database. And so you don't need to pay that amount for a database. And so we're starting to see companies now replace them with a simple database wrapped around with AI. And I think this is where the AI infrastructure companies, obviously the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, the Coheres, this is where they're next going to. They're not like just building better models for AI. They're now going to expand into infrastructure that wraps around everything that an enterprise company needs. And that then will eat into the original SaaS large companies. So I think it's full circle that's about to happen.
Well, the circle of life, as they say.
That's
but
true.
Yeah, thanks for all that. A lot to think about. I worry about the future. There's lots of things to be concerned with. I am hopeful that we'll keep finding things to do, and it seems clear that economies, will do just fine. It's how we weave through all the details is going to tell the texture of the future. So, at any rate,
yeah, I just hope that it gives us humans more time to do what humans like to do instead of some of the work that we've had to do just because it wasn't automatable. And now that it is, maybe we can actually be human, be more human.
Maybe. Well, I'm a Walt Disney kid. Yeah, I grew up with the world of the future, and I still believe in it. So let's take that as our hopeful note. Well, Roy, thank you very much for your time today, for everything you've done for the industry and the world, and for being yet another good human.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, folks. See you next time.